It's day 185. It's also November 7th, 2019. And we are in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name is Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Now, I'm not going to lie. This desert thing, it's starting to grow on me. And it's not just about the November weather. But it certainly doesn't hurt that when folks back home tell me how they're enjoying their 58-degree rainy breezy afternoon in Tacoma, I get to share that 58 was the low last night, and I'm enjoying a 78-degree sunny afternoon here in Lake Havasu City. Not a cloud in the sky. But maybe more importantly, it's about learning of the desert's personality. And oh yeah, the desert, it has a personality. As most every place we've been, I'm quickly learning that I knew nothing about a place I thought I knew quite a bit about. You see, until now, for me, the desert, well, that meant Phoenix, Arizona. Prior to 2006, I'd never even seen a desert. Not in real life, anyway. But when the company I worked for at the time purchased a chain of stores in Phoenix, I'd spend the next 4 years traveling to Phoenix from Tacoma for a week out of each month. And during that time, I came to dislike the desert quite a lot. Each month when I visited Phoenix, all I could think was hot. Really hot. And this born and raised West Coast guy, having spent the last 20-some years of his adult life within minutes of an ocean, I just really didn't get the desert. Now, it most certainly was about the people as well. That part of the desert was awesome. Our new family in Phoenix were some of the most open, genuine, and giving people I had ever met. And yeah, there was always that 3 or 4 month period, if I was lucky, December through March, maybe, when I could leave the chilly and wet Pacific Northwest winter and enjoy a few days of 60-degree nights and 80-degree days. Yeah, I totally got that part of the desert. But the other 8 months, my memories all revolved around hot. Frequently, recalling the time I rolled down the window of a rental car and absent-mindedly hung my arm out the window. The 2nd-degree burn on my forearm quickly snapped me back to the reality of where I was. Or the countless times I'd pull into the parking lot of one of our locations, trek quickly across the asphalt to enter the air-conditioned building, a quick hello to the staff before darting back to the office so I could sit down behind the manager's desk, quickly kick off my shoes, and wait for my feet to stop sweating. And then spend the next 3 days longing for that 7 p.m. flight on a Thursday night that would return me faithfully to the 58-degree air waiting to greet me back in Seattle. A 40-minute drive home, and the desert was over. Until the next month. But in the last few weeks, watching wild burros wander the streets of Beatty, or picking through the remnants of an abandoned home in Rhyolite, or even spending 2 nights on the parking lot of a fuel stop in Shores, I was learning that Phoenix is not the desert. Phoenix might be in the desert, but it most definitely is not the desert. The desert, well, by definition, is a dry, barren area of land that typically receives less than 10 inches of rain annually. Now compare that to the 40 or 50 inches of rain we get each year back home, and one quickly realizes why things look so very different. Deserts are characterized by their extreme conditions including sparse vegetation, high temperatures during the day, and significant temperature drops at night. They can be sandy, they can be rocky, They can even be covered with salt flats. And they often have unique ecosystems that have adapted to these harsh environments. And Arizona is unique in that it contains parts of 4 distinct desert regions, each with its own characteristics and ecosystems. And it's the only state in the U.S. that can make this claim. First up, the Sonoran Desert. This is the largest desert in Arizona, covering much of the southern part of the state. It's known for its diverse vegetation, including the iconic saguaro cactus, which is native to this desert and found nearly nowhere else on the planet. The Sonoran Desert is also home to a variety of wildlife, such as javelinas, coyotes, and countless bird species. Next, the Mohave Desert. And that's where we are right now in Lake Havasu City. It's located in the northwestern part of the state. The Mohave Desert is the driest desert in North America. It's characterized by its Joshua trees and unique rock formations. This desert spans not only Arizona, but also parts of Nevada, Utah, and even California. Third, the Chihuahuan Desert, found in the southeastern part of Arizona. The Chihuahuan Desert is known for its grasslands and the Chittacahua Mountains, which feature striking rock formations called hoodoos. This desert also extends into Mexico and parts of Texas and New Mexico here in the U.S. After reading a bit about this particular desert region, it's most definitely on the list of desert regions we will be sure to check out. And finally, the Great Basin Desert. This desert is located in the northeastern part of the state and is characterized by its cold desert climate. It features a ton of stereotypical sagebrush and other hardy vegetation adapted to this harsher condition. And it was in reading through the 4 different desert regions of a place called Arizona, one of which we're sitting in the middle of, when I realized that I'd spent 4 years of my life traveling to a place covered in asphalt and thinking that this was the desert. When the fact is, I missed it all, completely. But I'm here now. And I won't miss anything this time. Just 119 miles up the road from Meadview, we started passing through what we would later learn was BLM land, and the multiple motorhomes and travel trailers parked amidst the mountains everywhere were telling us we should hang out here for a while. We picked our dirt road, pulled down into, and then back up out of an arroyo, and then on up the hill to find the spot we would call home for the next few days. This is a great place to spend long days, and even longer November nights, learning about these Arizona deserts, and specifically a place called Lake Havasu City. Vacilando was due for an oil change, so our first morning would be spent learning about and scheduling an oil change with a local mechanic that offered mobile service. It sounded pretty convenient to have the oil change come to us. But little did we know that scheduling an oil change would also lead to our next lesson. A lesson around the predators that watch us, apparently no matter where we are. It was around 10 a.m. when the oil change guys arrived. Super nice guys, Rick and Chuck. They got to work right away. Chuck worked under the hood of Vacilando while Rick crawled underneath. Doogie, Billy, and I decided to get out of their way. Both the boys were tethered via their leashes and lounging on the ground while I sipped the last cup of coffee for the day. I was typing away on the laptop while Doogie studied what the guy under Vacilando was doing, and Billy was at the end of his leash, as usual, when I heard, "Where's your cat, man?" "What's that?" I responded, as I glanced down to see a hand come out from under Vacilando and point into the distance. Rick asked again, "Where's your cat?" and he kept pointing. I responded, "He's right here. Why?" Rick continued to point into the distance as he slid out from under Vacilando, and as I picked up Billy and followed Rick's gaze up into the mountainside, there it was. Almost indistinguishable from the branches of the mesquite tree it was perched in, a red-tailed hawk. Turns out that while Billy had been shifting his attention between the two strangers working on Vacilando and the occasional roadrunner scurrying across the desert floor in search of prey, the red-tailed hawk had been laser-focused on Billy. Now Rick explained that while Billy might have been a bit large for your average red-tailed hawk to consider prey, it didn't mean he wouldn't try. And an ugly scuffle on the desert floor would have determined the outcome. He went on to recommend that Billy definitely stay indoors at night when the more formidable horned owls were out hunting. They can definitely make a cat disappear into the sky pretty quickly, he noted. Rick finished up with, "It's the eagles to keep an eye out for, really. You typically find them out over the lake fishing. They prefer fish. But they're also known to make sweeps out over the desert from time to time, and you never know what might catch their eye." Thanking and paying the guys as they packed up a few minutes later, I was appreciative that along with my oil change I'd received a bit of a lesson when it comes to the safety of the boys out here in the desert. I'd already considered, way back there in Wyoming, that one really never knows what might be lurking out there in the grass or in the woods. But apparently, I also need to keep an eye out overhead for whatever might be doing a flyby. A little later that afternoon, I flipped on the TV for a quick news update. Every network was leading with the impeachment inquiry into President Trump, and then the cover of the wildfires devastating California for a second season in a row. And from there, things shifted a bit. One network told me about a mass shooting at a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, while another circled back around to talk more about the impeachment. I was also told of a cold snap gripping large parts of the country, throwing much of the Midwest into a deep freeze. And that made me even a little more grateful to be spending our November down here in the Mohave Desert. But it was when CBS began telling me of an incident at the Mall of America in Minnesota, in which a 5-year-old child had been thrown from a third-floor balcony by a 24-year-old male. That's when I turned off the television. Why? I shook my head as I grabbed the leash for a walk with Doogie. Why would the entire nation need to be told of such a horrible incident? A sick individual and a sick act. And then I remembered. Oh yeah, the money. Why are we as humans so drawn to the bad? You know, watching that train wreck? And why do legacy media networks get to capitalize on it? Now, I'm not even really sure why, but as I sat down with the laptop after our walk to begin reading about this place called Lake Havasu City, the first thing I looked up were the 5 highest-paid network anchors in the country. I think I wanted to understand a bit more about the money being made in the news industry and who was getting it. I was more than a little surprised to learn that the top-paid journalist on the list will make $45 million this year, and the lowest paid on the list still rakes in over $12 million. I found myself trying to internalize why a network news organization would strategize that spending $45 million on a single individual was a solid business decision. And then I think things started to fall into place for me. I've listened to, and I know all of the journalists on this list, and they all have very specific opinions when it comes to reporting certain elements of the news. How do I know their opinions? Because they tell me every time they report the news. It's as much about speculation and conjecture, so it makes sense, I guess, that Fox News is pretty confident that a guy named Sean Hannity can somehow get his viewers to think the same way he does, which is the same way Fox News needs us to think. And at the other end, CNN and ABC, well, they feel the same way about Anderson Cooper and Robin Roberts. Just not as strongly, I guess. Or, why does Fox News appear to have such deeper pockets? Back to that viewership thing, I guess. But in the end, I'm left pondering the same thing I always am after consuming the news. Why is it so difficult to get just the news? And when did it all become about so much cash? and down the rabbit hole I went. For relevance, I went back some 50 years, well before my time in front of a television watching a news anchor. A time when a guy named Walter Cronkite would take to the airwaves each night and report live for 15 or 30 minutes. Nearly 30 million viewers would tune in a time when television and newspapers were really the only source of the nation's news. And with around 60 million viewers each night tuning into one of the three available networks, this meant that nearly half the nation was listening to one man and believing him. And after watching a few YouTube videos of Walter Cronkite myself, it feels like the nation believed him because he reported the facts. He didn't make stuff up. He didn't spread rumors or conspiracy theories. He certainly didn't tout personal opinions. And CBS paid Walter Cronkite a little over $2 million a year, factoring in inflation, to tell half the country each night what was happening in the world. But today, Fox News pays Sean Hannity $45 million a year to speak to just under 4 million Americans each night. And clearly, Fox News needs those 4 million Americans to believe him. And I think they do. But what's unsettling for me is that anyone that takes the time to do a little bit of fact-checking on most anything he tells us will learn that he's telling us his opinion and what he thinks. And his opinion does not always square with the truth. Oh man, I gotta start paying attention. Anyways, we'd spend the rest of the afternoon enjoying the scenery, the weather, and watching those around us do the same. And then it was time to learn a little more about this place we were in, and how a place called Lake Havasu City came to be. Now, the first thing I'd learn right out of the gate is that, relatively speaking, this area in general is fairly new to modern civilization. All the way up through and into the 1930s, the area was primarily inhabited by Native Americans. They continued to live along the Colorado River in villages growing crops and fishing the river. European and American settlers were present in the area, but in pretty small numbers, and primarily involved in the trapping and fur trading industries. These early settlers would become more involved in the area in the mid-19th century as the steamship industry began to grow, and the Colorado River would become an important travel route in the movement of goods throughout the area. Now, activity in the area would remain pretty constant all the way up to the installation of the Parker Dam. The construction of the Parker Dam began in 1934 and was completed in 1938, creating Lake Havasu. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 was a crucial agreement among 7 U.S. states in the Colorado River Basin. Its objective was to allocate the river's resources among the states and manage its use effectively. This would be the agreement that laid the groundwork for the installation of various water management projects in the area, including the installation of the Parker Dam. But the Parker Dam didn't come without a little bit of controversy. The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California was a significant proponent of the dam. They needed a reliable water source for the rapidly growing population in Southern California. And Lake Havasu would serve as a reservoir for the Colorado River Aqueduct, which supplied water to the Southern California region. But in Arizona, the construction of the Parker Dam was contentious. Several political groups and utility companies in Arizona opposed the project. They feared it would limit their access to the Colorado River water. And the state of Arizona even deployed the National Guard to the dam site in 1934 to assert its opposition. But despite this, the project proceeded, and Arizona eventually signed the Colorado River Compact in 1944. But even in the midst of the controversy, the proponents of the dam further asserted that the hydroelectric power generated by the dam, along with the increase in water management effectiveness throughout the desert region, would far outweigh any negative impacts The location for the Parker Dam was chosen due to its strategic position on the Colorado River, just 150 miles downstream of the Hoover Dam. The nearby community of Parker, Arizona, would lend its name to the project. The site was ideal for creating a large reservoir, and generation of hydroelectric power would only enhance the power being generated at the Hoover Dam. And just like every dam being constructed at the time, building the Parker Dam was a significant engineering feat of its own. The dam is a concrete arch gravity structure, like that of Hoover Dam, but unlike Hoover Dam, 73% of the Parker Dam's height is below the original riverbed, making it the deepest dam in the world. The construction required extensive excavation to reach bedrock in order to ensure a stable foundation. That meant that a dam that is 320 feet tall is 235 feet below the riverbed. Upon its completion in 1938, the creation of Lake Havasu would completely transform the area, bringing a large body of water and creating over 450 miles of shoreline in the middle of the Mohave Desert. Havasu is the Mohave word for blue. During World War II, the area would begin being referred to as Site 6. Established in 1942 as an emergency landing field for the Kingman Army Airfield just 60 miles away. Site 6 was an abbreviated term used for the location's official name, the Lake Havasu Auxiliary Field 6. The military built a dirt runway on a peninsula, which is now an island, and this site was used for the training of pilots and air crews, and it also served as a rest and recreation area for military personnel offering activities like fishing, swimming, and boating. After the war, the military closed the landing field in 1946. But the land was actually privately owned by Corrine and Victor Spratt, who transformed the site into the fly-in fishing resort, and they would operate the resort until 1958, after which it was sold to Robert P. McCulloch, and this would mark the beginning of Lake Havasu City. Robert McCulloch founded McCulloch Motors in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1943. He would move the operation to Los Angeles, California in 1946. And in 1964, he would establish a factory and housing for its workers right here in Lake Havasu City. He had been searching for a location to test his outboard engines when he discovered the potential in the land surrounding Lake Havasu. Now, prior to McCulloch's arrival in the area, the city had been created as the Lake Havasu Irrigation and Drainage District by the Mohave County Board of Supervisors. But it would be the vision of Robert McCulloch that would transform the area into what we see today. Even before expanding his company's operation into the area, he would begin acquiring land and promoting the area for residential and recreational purposes. He understood the potential in the land around the lake and what the area could be. His vision included creating a planned community that would draw both residents and visitors, along with creating ways to tap into the recreational opportunity around and on the lake. One of his most fascinating contributions to the community would be in bringing a piece of British history to the Mohave Desert of Arizona. It seemed only McCulloch saw the value in having a 140-year-old piece of British architecture relocated some 5,000 miles and placed as the centerpiece of his fledgling community. Now, the London Bridge, I would learn, has a fascinating history that dates back over 800 years. The original bridge, spanning the River Thames, would be completed in 1209 with the purpose of connecting the city of London on the north bank with the Southwark on the south bank. This connection, spanning some 900 feet across the river, was deemed crucial for several reasons, not the least of which were the bridge would facilitate the movement of goods and people, boosting trade and commerce between the two sides of the river. The bridge itself would become a bustling hub for merchants and traders, some even setting up residence in their shop on the bridge itself, and by the 14th century, over 500 people actually lived on the bridge. construction of the bridge also came with military purpose at the forefront. During the bridge's construction, the Byzantine Empire, the Chinese Empire, and the Islamic Caliphate were all in a quest for world domination in one way or another. But Britain, it had its eye on a different type of world domination, and the ability to move troops and assets quickly across the river was definitely a part of the vision, and the original London Bridge definitely saw many of those ambitions realized. By the 18th century, the bridge had survived multiple fires, including the Great Fire of London in 1666. But the City of London had outgrown the nearly 600-year-old bridge, so the decision was made to replace it with the new London Bridge. Work on the foundation of the new bridge would begin in 1825, and the construction would span some 6 years, being completed in 1831. But it turns out the lifespan of the new London Bridge would prove to be much shorter than that of its predecessor. The combination of the significant urban growth in the London metropolitan area, introduction of the automobile, and the advancements in archaeological and engineering science would all lead to the need to replace the bridge yet again. By the 1960s, the bridge was failing. The increase in traffic and the weight of it would put the 130-year-old bridge under stress it simply could not handle. The footings of the bridge were actually sinking into the River Thames. But this time, the nearly 140-year-old architecture would not simply be thrown away. Instead, it would be sold as the London Bridge we see today took its place. And that's where the American entrepreneur Robert McCulloch enters the scene. He would purchase the bridge in 1968 for $2.5 million. The bridge would be dismantled, with each stone being numbered and shipped to the U.S. via the Panama Canal. The blocks of the bridge would arrive in Long Beach, California, and then be trucked to their final destination in Lake Havasu City, some 312 miles away. The bridge would be reassembled stone by stone over the next 3 years over a concrete structure in Lake Havasu City. Total construction costs would exceed $7 million, including the purchase price, which means around $60 million in today's money. The bridge would be dedicated in 1971 and has since become a major tourist attraction, helping to transform Lake Havasu City into a popular destination. And apparently, just like that, that's how we end up with an 800-year-old piece of British history in the middle of an Arizona desert in the United States of America. A country that would not even exist for 567 years after the original bridge was built in England. Now, all this is pretty impressive considering that the press at the time would label the endeavor McCulloch's folly, reporting on the absurdity of such an endeavor. But history would prove the McCulloch vision right. Today, Lake Havasu City and the London Bridge pretty consistently rank in the top 5 tourist attractions in the state and generate nearly $200 million a year. Throughout this period, McCulloch would found and name the city in 1963 as a planned community. It would be officially incorporated in 1978. And nearly 40 years later, the over 50,000 folks that call Lake Havasu City home enjoy over 300 days each year of sunshine and celebrate the community and invite visitors throughout the year to celebrations like the Western Winter Blast. It's a pretty spectacular pyrotechnic and fireworks show held every February, and the Havasu Balloon Festival and Fair. This January event features hot air balloons, live entertainment, and family activities all around the lake. The International World Jet Ski Finals. Held each October, this event attracts jet ski enthusiasts from around the world. And the Havasu 95 Speedway holds regular events year-round. There's even a Chillin' and Swillin' Beer Festival. It's a craft beer festival held each year in which all proceeds are donated to local charities. And the Havasu Triathlon? It's an annual swim, run, and kayak event that attracts both professional and amateur athletes from over 35 states. The community even hosts the Lake Havasu Farmers Market twice a month, all year round. But for us, we would spend 10 days on a hillside in the Mohave Desert, just a mile or so away from Lake Havasu City, spending the days exploring the shores of the lake, hiking the desert, and the occasional walk around town. I had to go see that London Bridge. Being welcomed each morning by the desert in different ways. Sometimes it's the quiet. Sometimes it's one neighbor packing up and heading out while another one rolls in. Other times, it would be the sudden awakening in the early morning hours as dozens of adventure seekers rushed by us in their side-by-sides, headed for unknown adventure as they disappeared in a cloud of dust over that hill just above us. I learned pretty quickly to get the windows shut before those side-by-sides ride by, or it's an afternoon of dusting. And then, a few more hours of silence before watching the dust clouds rise again over that very same hill, well before the light bars on the side-by-sides bounced into sight at dusk and rushed by yet again, in the opposite direction. It was interesting to me that in many ways, this desert was very similar to the one just 270 miles behind us in Beatty. But at the same time, so very different. There were no burros here wandering the campsites, and there's no interaction between the campers. In Beatty, Kentucky John and Yakima Cheryl had approached me. They seemed to almost have a need to bring me up to speed on the goings-on in the neighborhood, so to speak. But here, no fewer than 8 to 10 campers each night, but zero interaction. This seemed to be a transient place. Campers came and went each day, so our neighbors were different each night. And beyond a friendly wave here and there, no one seemed to care much about what was going on next door. Interesting, I suppose. But what does that mean? I don't know. Waking up each morning, thinking we'd pack up and head out, only to find myself asking, why? Over that second cup of coffee, while staring into and through the limbs of that mesquite tree, maybe waiting for that next red-tailed hawk to perch and continue its hunt for the day. Where else would we be? Where else would we want to be? Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.